Hey there, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back. I'm your host, PattSun, and today we're gonna be taking a look at r/infidelity, where we will see a cautionary tale on why you should never, ever take a hoe seriously. Let's begin. When my wife died, I discovered her double life and the plundering of our family. Posted by Reddit user Chemical Bus.
TLDR, after a long and difficult 20-year marriage, my wife dies of a stroke and I discover that she has lived a double life with a lover and that she stole our youngest daughter's college fund for him. Hello Reddit friends. This is my first post here. Since English is not my first language and since this story spans several years, I apologize if I don't have the best prose or if I give too much detail. I will make an effort to be synthetic and to express myself clearly. Still, it's a long story. I ask for advice and comments from all of you. I have read many posts on these topics, and although there are always aggressive people in them, I see the majority of well-intentioned people wanting to help. I thank you in advance for your patience and kindness. I am a 48-year-old man. Let's say my name is Arthur. I have been widowed for 2 years. My late wife, I'll call her Amelia, and I met at work 25 years ago, got married 23 years ago, and were together for 20 years. She was 2 years older than me. A very attractive young woman, a little punk and charismatic. She had a fine face, colorful hair, and a distinguished and magnetic physique. I was a good-looking guy then, and although I'm not tall, I was fit and I'm light-skinned, which in our country, I'm not from the US, but from Latin America, is not so common. I knew that she had a very active social and sentimental life, while I was a more introverted guy with good but few friends, very fond of reading and sports. Although I'm quite the rocker, I had a more conservative upbringing, especially when it came to family and relationships. I would never discriminate or be offensive to anyone for being who they are, but I believe in traditional family for myself. She and I became friends because we shared an afternoon shift at the company where we worked. I was engaged to a gorgeous girl and Amelia, on her side, was dating a lot of guys. I found her attractive, but I was engaged and like I said, I'm a traditional guy. My girlfriend was less showy but no less beautiful than Amelia and I was happy. But one day, my girlfriend told me that her life plan was to finish university and pursue studies abroad. Her family was too controlling, which is common in my country, and did not want her to study more. But she aspired to be a top academic and she wanted to pursue postgraduate studies. For my part, I had a good job and many prospects for growth at 23 years old and I didn't want to get away from my family and friends, nor did I want to leave the country. So reluctantly, and because we couldn't make our visions coincide, we broke off the engagement. She went to another country and has lived abroad since then. Around that time, my friendship with Amelia strengthened. She told me that she was right not to get married and took me to a party. She tried to go further, but I told her that she preferred us to be friends for now because she was still affected by my breakup. She accepted. But a few months later, she suddenly quit the job and with her severance money, there was a voluntary retirement program in the company at that time, she went to travel around Europe for a few months. I regretted her departure, but I continued doing my thing. Amelia started sending me a lot of messages through ICQ, Messenger, and the other services of those times, around the year 2000. Our friendship grew stronger and when she returned, about 7 months later, we started dating. She insisted on testing us for STDs before having sex. I accepted even though I knew he was healthy because my ex-fiancé and I took great care of each other and were faithful, but Amelia had had a troubled life. I came out clean from the tests. She said she did too. We started having sex, and although we took care of each other, within a few months she became pregnant. I was happy and told her that we should have the child and get married. She took it very differently. She was upset and scared. It took her a few days to accept. She finally did it and we rushed to get married. It was a simple wedding, in front of our closest families and our closest friends. The problems began soon. The first was that we began to go to medical appointments for pregnancy checkups. In my country they are mandatory, both with public social security and with private services. There, through a distraction from her gynecologist, I learned that Amelia had had an abortion shortly before and that she had human papillomavirus. By the time, the abortion had been performed just before her resignation from her job and her trip to Europe. I got tested and discovered that she also already had HPV. She hadn't told me anything about the abortion nor HPV, quite the opposite. She told me that she had come out clean in her analysis. She agreed to have skipped that point because HPV is harmful in women and does nothing for men, she said. I felt shocked. I have said that I am a bit traditional, but I was very much in love, and Amelia added that she had decided to abort because the child was not her then boyfriend's, but another guy's, and she did not want it, but now she was committed to the pregnancy. I know that can be considered a big red flag, but let's remember that I was in love. I had just turned 24 and I was convinced, because Amelia told me at the time that she wanted to change her life and settle down with me and our son. So I decided to stick to the idea that my relationship with her was a clean slate between the two of us. The doctor gave me a quick talk about HPV, and I have never had any problems with it, no warts, and thank God, no cancer. I check myself frequently anyway. Our son was born. Amelia and I took care of him. Little by little we consolidated a family. Amelia found a good job. Although not everything was easy, we grew up, and 3 years later we had a second child, this time a girl. I felt great happiness. Amelia was a very dedicated mother, I was a very present father, and we both worked hard for our family. But things were not going perfectly, and the second serious problem came then. Amelia had ups and downs of character. Although to people outside she was a perfect wife, loving and fun, at home she was moody, silent and distant. She sometimes had outbursts of aggression. I tactfully asked her to see a doctor. She made an appointment with a psychologist and he referred her to a psychiatrist. They ordered her to have some tests done. Amelia said she would be under observation. She later said that she had been prescribed a mild medication for anxiety. One day when our daughter was 3 years old, my mother-in-law asked us to take the children with her for the weekend to her house, to spend the night and cook and play. We accept. I thought that would give us time for a weekend alone, maybe a romantic outing. I had proposed doing it several times, but Amelia only wanted to travel with the kids and she always postponed or rejected any plans alone. The truth is that our intimate life was not very active. I looked for her a lot, because she was still in love with her and she was very beautiful and desirable, but she always said that she didn't feel like it. She later said that the medicine didn't help her libido either. I was frustrated, but I respected her denials. I tried to talk about it and suggested going to therapy, but she refused. Well, on Friday of that weekend, I planned for us to go to the movies and have a drink in the same neighborhood. I explained it to her and she accepted, but she said that she had a commitment for noon. We agreed to meet at the house before dinner time. I felt like it was a first date. I went to get a haircut, bought a new shirt and some perfume. I didn't usually wear them. I'm more of the type that smells like soap and deodorant. Everything to be attractive to her, but Amelia didn't arrive. She sent me a message saying that she was with a friend and that she would come later. She twice added other messages delaying her arrival. She took so long that I fell asleep. I was very sad and upset that I took a sleeping pill. I woke up because she made noise when she arrived. It was 5 o'clock in the morning. She smelled of alcohol. She told me that she and her friends had been drinking up to half an hour before. I was furious and upset that I didn't want to hear her, and I rolled over in bed. She didn't try to say anything else. There were a few years of almost total estrangement. I was very hurt, but my mother and my close friends advised me to calm down and talk to her. I didn't want to take the risk of being away from my children and I focused on them and my work. I grew a lot in employment in those years and we began to have a much better standard of living. We were able to buy a house and another property, change cars frequently and take long vacations around the country and some nearby countries. But the relationship between Amelia and I was at a standstill. She wouldn't come near me and I was hurt in my corner. We go years without having intimate relationships. Amelia was now a middle-class lady with a suburban car to go wherever she wanted, good clothes and money for a gym, pool and beauty salon. I was a well-paid executive, respected in the industry and envied by some. Some will ask me why I resisted so much if we were going nowhere. Well, I didn't sit around doing nothing. We went to several couples therapies that failed because Amelia boycotted them in one way or another. I tried every few weeks to approach her and talk in depth. I constantly told her what I was attracted to and what I loved her about. Our children are also great kids, loving and have never caused any serious problems. As a person who believed in God, I also had faith that Amelia would eventually understand that she was harming her family and would stop. She often accepted that her behavior was harmful. She promised to go to therapy and change for a while, but she always relapsed. Yes, I know I should have been more firm perhaps, but love for Amelia blinded me for many years. I just wanted us to be happy. Then came a very good streak in my job. I won several projects that gave me good bonuses and in particular, I won the direction of a project that required me to live an entire year in Europe. I was happy. I could go with the whole family and my children would have a bilingual school. I would receive a good additional salary and we would also have time to travel and see different countries because the distances in Western Europe are comparatively short with those of America. Amelia, in theory, loved Europe and had encouraged me to fight for that project and move it forward. But when I won it, it went down. Her mood became worse than ever. She went from being distant to being rude and unpleasant to me. She even began to attack our children, who were already teenagers and whom, when they were children, she always treated in a severe but considerate and non-violent way. Although we traveled a lot and saw wonderful works, landscapes, and people, our memories of Europe are quite bitter. Amelia became worse than ever in terms of aggression. She became jealous and controlling of me and our children and increasingly secretive about herself. Her entire family gathered her and we talked to her, told her that she was hurting us and that she needed to stop and get care for her. I supported my children to express themselves freely. Amelia was very shocked, she said, by our prospects and she promised to go to treatment. She admitted to having stopped taking her medication and to having lied about the supposed online therapy she was receiving when we asked her about her mental health issues. When we returned to our country, things got worse because the COVID pandemic began, which affected the whole world. Although we could do our work from home without problems, and the children's schools also quickly started their online programs, the environment was terrible. Amelia left the family room and moved to the studio where she worked, on another floor of the house. She told me that it was a recommendation from a new psychologist, whom she began to consult. Things were deteriorating. She spent days locked up. She sometimes stopped bathing for 2 or 3 days, when at home we always used to shower daily. Even the person who worked in the housekeeping, a woman of a certain age, told me that she felt unpleasant towards her. She didn't want me to clean her study or put away her things. Amelia was always estranged from her family and she only spoke to a couple of friends, named Chandra and Beth. They were from different backgrounds and were not friends with each other. Chandra was a woman very given to talking about vibes and horoscopes. Beth was more sensible. I always thought that she was an intelligent woman and that she was a good influence on Amelia because she was interested in art and history and other subjects. But Amelia was getting closer to Chandra and less to Beth. From a receipt from our cable company, I discovered that Amelia was renting adult movies on the PPV service. I attributed it to her extreme loneliness and didn't think much of it. But then one day, she asked me to help her with her computer because it was paralyzed by a virus. Upon cleaning her of viruses, I discovered that she was full of pornography, even degrading things, which surprised and distressed me. I am not a Puritan and I consider sexuality to be natural and desirable, even without love involved if 2 people agree to do it for fun. But the things Amelia looked at gave me a feeling of anxiety of not knowing anything about my wife. Then came the crisis. Amelia, one day, accused me of cheating on her. She had gone to check my messages on my cell phone, which I left without a password because I didn't feel like I had anything to hide, and she found some conversations that I had had with that ex-fiancé from so many years before in recent months. And yes, we had resumed contact, but not for something sexual by any means. She, as I said, lived outside the country. Through mutual friends I learned that her youngest son, she was married and had 2 children, had been hospitalized due to COVID and was seriously ill, so I sent her a message wishing her everything was fine. She thanked me and told me that the child, fortunately, had overcome the illness, and we began to talk from time to time about our lives and our children. These talks were never sexual in any way, nor did they have sexual allusions of any kind. The most intimate thing we did was remember, laughing, our first date, which took place next to a well-known monument in our city. Well, those talks upset Amelia, who accused me of being unfaithful and asked me to divorce her. My patience is over. I talked to my children and explained everything to them in detail, even showing them the chats. I added to them, which was true, that if their mother and mine's relationship had even been regular and if she had not stopped talking to me for months and had moved rooms, it was likely that I would never have chatted so many times with that ex-fiancé, now a renowned and married academic who lived 10,000 kilometers away. Amelia kept her promise and left the house. She lived for a few days with Chandra before renting a small house a 5-minute walk from our home. She told me that she needed a period of reflection, but that then she would claim custody of the kids. That seemed unreal to me. Our oldest son was about to move out of town to go to university, and our youngest would take just a little longer to do so, maybe 2 years and a few more months. I talked to the boys. My oldest son, who has always had a mediating nature, said that perhaps spending those remaining months in the city with his mother would help her. My daughter thought the same. I felt sad, but I accepted. Amelia lived alone with hardly any contact with us for 4 months. She sometimes summoned me to her new house. One of them even talked about how she could only forgive me for my infidelity if we had sex in her new bed. I was very taken aback, but I agreed. We had sex for the first time in years. Only Amelia asked me to use protection. I knew she couldn't get pregnant because she asked for tubal ligament surgery when our youngest daughter was born. I asked her for explanations. She told me that she was taking treatment for HPV and the doctor had told her that she should use protection during sex. After that, and despite the fact that she sent aggressive messages, usually only asking me for more money than we agreed that I would give her monthly to support herself, she also began sending me sexually explicit photos of herself and making suggestive comments. I thought that this could be the beginning of a solution and the way to overcome the crisis, and I accepted those advances. But it was as if they were two different people. There was an aggressive, tough Amelia, interested in money and who wanted a divorce, and another more similar to the girl I knew in my youth, daring, provocative, playful, and sexy. I started going to therapy because I didn't know what to do. Our children went with her and stayed 4 months. From the first day they told me that Amelia was aggressive and harsh with them, that she made constant allusions of disdain towards me, and she accused them of being on my side. They then confessed to me that they had chosen to go with her because Amelia contacted them and threatened to commit suicide if they didn't. In our culture, talking about mental health is taboo. They were very intimidated by her mother and didn't tell me anything at first. Then Amelia denied everything when I confronted her. My children told me that Amelia and Beth had grown apart and ended their friendship. I was sad because Beth was a positive influence and she was always kind and empathetic to us and our children. It was obvious that things were getting out of control. They were terrible months. Amelia was verbally violent with our children and me. Then she stopped talking to them and locked herself in. And she told people that I was making her miserable, even though I covered all the expenses and had had to accept much more work than normal to support the family's new arrangement. Then came the end. My older brother died suddenly one day of a heart attack. It was a blow for me. Amelia was very tender and supportive at first, but the next day she looked for me and she made a series of ironic and out-of-place comments about my brother's death. I asked her not to do them and she scoffed, saying that if anything it was too soon. I exploded. I asked her to cut off all contact except for matters involving our children. A few weeks later our son moved to college. He left crying. His mother had insulted him before leaving, telling him that he would never do anything in life without his mother and calling him a traitor for leaving her. For my son, who has always been a great boy, it was very hard to hear himself called that. His next victim was our youngest daughter. She started harassing her and getting too strict. She didn't give her permission to see her friends or to have a boyfriend. She was 16. She was starting to date boys. She obsessively checked her phone and iPad. I swore to all our mutual friends that I don't have a lover and that as soon as we divorced, I would marry her. And if they asked who she was, she gave the name of my ex-fiancé who, as I already said, is a married woman with children with an important academic position and in a very distant country. Many mutual friends believed it and began to treat me coldly. There were some terrible months of loneliness, missing my children and always having to defend a little girl from her mother, who harassed her in every possible way. We began divorce proceedings and I asked for custody of my daughter. The girl agreed. Amelia was furious about this and she blocked the divorce until we agreed on joint custody, although I managed to make my house the main one. Everything happened so fast that it was like a bad dream. One day, I received a call from Amelia's cell phone. It was Chandra. Amelia had fainted while they were running through the park and they had to call the paramedics. When I arrived she was gone. She died suddenly. Doctors said she had a stroke. The autopsy found nothing conclusive. I asked the doctors if maybe she had had a serious problem for years without us knowing, and that would explain her behavioral problems, her aggression, her emotional swings. The doctor did some more tests and analysis and could not conclude anything either. Sometimes people just act badly and it's not because of their organs, he told me. I felt terrible. Not only had I lost the most important woman in my life and mother of my children, but I felt overwhelming guilt. Maybe if I had forced her to take care of herself and treat herself and exhaust all medical avenues, we could have had another life, and she could have stayed alive. In fact, the doctor told me not to torture myself, that many deadly problems escape all analysis. The truth is that the tests that were performed on Amelia at the time found no signs of anything abnormal. In the autopsy they also did not find tumors, malformations, parasites or anything strange, just the effusion, a venous problem. The first months were tremendous. We all fell into depression. I asked my son one time when he visited us if he could take charge of closing Amelia's social accounts and recovering family photos from her phone and computer. I forgot what I had seen on that machine when she and I were still together. My son started to check, but he stopped almost immediately and told me, "Dad, you have to take care of this." I started doing that review, and my world collapsed even more in a few minutes. I discovered that Amelia had a lover that she had had him all these years. The guy who had gotten her pregnant the first time. Let's say his name was Emmett. I found years of messages, emails, photographs, audios. It was terrible. I spent days like crazy, reading, listening, and watching all that nightmare material. Remember that Amelia gave me HPV. Well, her origin was in this little guy. Do you remember that one night she didn't come home? Well, guess who she was with in a seedy motel? Do you remember that she collapsed when I told her that we were going to live in Europe for a year and that there she behaved like a demon with us, her husband and her children? Well, it was because for a year she would have to be away from Emmett. With Emmett, as I saw in the messages and emails, Amelia was sexy, mischievous, spicy, sweet, funny, kind, understanding. Regardless of the moment. Although they drifted apart at times, Emmett had been married, had children, and had gotten divorced. They always came back to talk, see each other, and do everything they did together. I realized that my worst times with Amelia had been her best with Emmett, and the best of those in which Emmett had disappeared from the scene for an extended time. Over the years they took advantage of technology and went from using email, ICQ and Messenger to using Skype, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp. And they had a romance that lasted the same length as my marriage, but with a lot more sex and fun. While I was breaking my back working for my family and doing my part in raising our wonderful children, she fulfilled her family duties, yes, but she let her marriage collapse and she secretly hooked up with someone else. It devastated me to know that Emmett and Amelia were making fun of me, that they called me Mr. Important, and that Amelia said I was a desperate teenage lover while Emmett was perfect. I also realized that she went from speaking well of our children while they were young and docile, to continually complaining about them as they grew older and became more independent. But the worst blow was yet to come. When a few months later I thought I was over all that, I talked to my son to find out what he had seen. Luckily, he had only seen the porn part. Another problem came. For years we saved some college funds for our children. They were charged from the common account, in which there were always more than enough resources. With that money our son was able to move. Well, when the time came to collect my daughter's college savings, I discovered that Amelia had collected it early and there was no longer a cent. It was devastating. The problem is not money, because luckily I have a good job and I can pay for whatever is necessary. The problem is her betrayal to our daughter of the trust of her family. And the worst thing is that money, as I found out in the messages with Emmett, was that she had given that money to the guy without having any kind of document signed, like a support gift. Emmett was going through a tough time financially because he was a good-for-nothing divorce with a bad job who had a hard time paying his own child support. So Amelia gave him our daughter's college money. I went crazy. I called the insurance company to complain and they told me that they had notified me by postal letter and email about the issue. I never saw those emails, of course. Deep in my problems with Amelia, I was stupid enough to think that these were common bills, like the ones that arrived every month and I didn't check them. Both Amelia and I were legal representatives and could withdraw the money ourselves without the other's signature or authorization. The type of contract one signs when one trusts one's partner. So not only have I discovered that my entire life was a lie, but we lost my daughter's college money. To add further frustration, when I was going through my old messages, I found one from Beth, Amelia's former friend, who told me that Amelia had confessed to her about her affair with Emmett. Beth, who is a person of conscience and dignity, was horrified, asked to end the friendship and sent me a message telling me everything, which I didn't see until it was too late. I don't know how much I could have improved the scenario if I had been able to do something then, when she sent me that email that I didn't open either. Maybe I would have saved those savings. Maybe Amelia could have been treated. Don't know. I am devastated, confused, broken, and I don't know what else to do. I texted Beth, told her my discoveries, and asked her to tell me everything she knows in detail to see if I could find traces of the money or a way to get it back. I thought about confronting Emmett, but on the one hand I think I would get violent with him if I saw him. And on the other hand, there is no document in which he undertakes to return that money. He can say it was a gift and it would be difficult to prove that it wasn't. The audios and messages that talk about it are ambiguous, and I doubt that a court will be able to make the guy return the money, and I don't think his conscience moves him to do it. What conscience, if he was the lover of a married woman for more than 20 years, even when he himself had a family? My final pain was the suspicion that my children were not really mine, although they bear a good physical resemblance to my family. Both Amelia and I have light skin and our children are like that, while Emmett has more Latin skin, at least how they see us Latinos in the USA, although with European features. I convinced my children to take some tests on a DNA website. I know they are not 100% exact, but it could be an approximation, to learn more about our European and indigenous ancestors, because I did not want to tell them anything about my suspicions and accumulate suffering in their backs. The test showed a very high correspondence with me. I breathed. I told them that the results had not come back clear, and then we did have a full paternity test, which confirmed that they are 100% mine. That's one of the few happinesses I've had lately. Anyway, this is my history. It is hard and sad, and I hope that none of you reading has gone through something like this or will ever go through something like this in your lives. I would like to confront Emmett or find a way to get that money back, but I don't know how. Maybe when I talk to Beth, I'll find out more details and something will occur to me. For now, this is the end. I am infinitely grateful to those who have reached this point in my story. I will also greatly appreciate your comments and advice. Thank you all.
You see, gentlemen, this is what's going to happen to you if you decide to be a caretaker of the town bicycle. Let this be a cautionary tale to all you younger men out there. Never, ever take a host seriously and never tolerate disrespect. Now for you, OP. My goodness me, there were a million obvious red flags that you refused to acknowledge when you were with your wife. I have no idea if you were codependent or something, but by reading this, even if you never found out about the cheating, there were 1,000 other reasons to divorce this woman. But you stayed. Why did you allow her to treat you and your children this way? Many people would have walked away when they found out about the HPV, but you stayed. Your wife refused to go to date nights with you. The one date night that she said that she would go to, she spent the night out with someone else. Seriously, why did you still stay? You damn donut, it hit you all over the face and you never acknowledged that this woman was a horrible human being. You should have taken your children and ran, but you stayed. Not to mention that you already knew she was a cheater even before you got together. You could have dodged that bullet, OP. So tell me,
why didn't you dodge?
Look, man, I truly hope that none of your children end up in a relationship with a serial cheating narcissistic asshole because you showed them that it was okay to stay with one. That's what you've been doing their entire lives. You let them suffer for literal decades. You failed yourself as a man, a protector, and most importantly, you failed them as their father. As for the affair partner, go and confront him, man. Even if you won't be able to get the money back, at least you'll be able to beat the shit out of the man that stole from your children. Viewer support is the best way for me to remain independent and continue bringing you these daily videos, which will always be here on my channels for you to watch absolutely free. So please consider subscribing to me on Rumble and on YouTube. Both will be linked in the description box down below. Thanks for listening, everyone. If you even somewhat enjoyed today's story, make sure to give this video a thumbs up, and if you really like it, consider subscribing to PattSun to never miss a future upload. Stay strong.